session. Thank you to those of you who are ready to begin. Dr. Duran, please let Dr. Braybrand return to his seat. Got you back. Got you back.
I get you too.
All right. This afternoon we have just a little under an hour and a half to stay on track. With us today we have Jean Carr, the Executive Director and CIO of the ERFC. Thank you. Always lovely to see you. We have Lisa Scott, the Communication Specialist for ERFC, and Mr. Jim Rohner, Deputy Executive Director. And is Mr. Lunter with us today? No, he's not. Okay, so unless... Oh, where did they go? Where's the sixth? Oh, Ms. Strauss. I missed her, I'm sorry. Okay, so we do have quorum. So we will go ahead with a year in review. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Palchik. What I'm going to cover today is our annual State of ERFC presentation. We've given the presentation to the school board for at least the last 10 years, so you know what the status of the ERFC system is. So we like to come to you in good times and in bad. Last fiscal year, as you well know, was bad times, and I'm happy to come here today and say that we have much better news to report today. So it is a pleasure to give this presentation today. I do want to acknowledge the senior staff that are here, Jim Rohner, Deputy Executive Director, and Lisa Scott, our Communications Specialist. And we also have several of our ERFC trustees here today, Kristen Michael, who is our Treasurer, Susan Quinn, and Marty Smith. So I want to thank the ERFC Board of Trustees for its thoughtful input during the past year. For the agenda this afternoon, I'm going to cover our membership statistics, current trends. I will review the financial status of the fund and the current return information. I'll cover our historical investment and administrative expenses, and then I'll close with our accomplishments during the previous fiscal year and our initiatives that we're planning for the upcoming fiscal year. So first of all, just as a review, the ERFC benefit plan structure is shown on slide 3. All of the school board members are very well versed in this structure because of the deliberations you had this past year, but for those new in the room, and as a review, ERFC is supplemental to the Virginia retirement system. It's funded by investment earnings, the employer contribution paid by FCPS, and the employee contributions. And under the budget that you just approved, the employee contribution rate stays the same at 3%, and the employer contribution increased to 6.24% of payroll. We had originally proposed that the employer contribution rate be 6.4%, and it was decreased because of the benefit changes that were recently approved. So last calendar year, FCPS put in $78 million. The employees contributed $42 million. And so it is a plan that's supported by both the employees and the employer. But the investment income was $152 million, so that's almost twice what FCPS put into the system. And it has provided the majority of the funding over the last 10 years. There are 2 plans within ERFC. The legacy system was designed to supplement both Social Security and ERFC. It was formed in 1973, so it's over 40 years old. It is a very complicated design. It's not that common anymore. It's called an offset plan. So we calculate a benefit, and then we offset approximately what you're going to be getting from the Virginia retirement system. It's very complicated to administer, as I say, and it was really designed for teachers who are able to retire at age 55 with 25 years of service. The school board determined in 2001 that that was a design that no longer accommodated its current workforce, And so they put in a much more simplified structure in 2001, independent of Social Security, independent of the Virginia retirement system. Streamlined also that it doesn't give you sick leave credit. There's no purchase of service allowed in ERFC 2001. There's no disability provisions. The ERFC 2001 plan now has 2 tiers as a result of your actions this year. The Tier 2 was approved by the school board on April 24th. And as a reminder, what happened there was the eligibility change to the Rule of 90, which meets the eligibility requirement that's in the VRS hybrid plan. The final average salary calculation was changed from 3 years to 5 years, also similar to the hybrid plan. And the cost of living adjustment was tied to the consumer price index. So those were the 3 changes that you made to institute this new Tier 2. Now, just also keep in mind that employees, as I said, are putting 3% into ERFC. They're also putting 5% into the VRS, and as was illustrated by Aon in the study that you commissioned and that they reported on in 2016, this rate is higher than the Fairfax County retirement system, and it is also higher than any of the peer school systems in the surrounding areas, with the exception of DC Public Schools, which is also 8%. Just to give you a little history on the membership, most of the people now are in this ERFC 2001 plan. We have 16,856 members in that plan out of 21,000. That's 78% of the membership. The legacy plan now has less than 5,000 members in it. The majority of the retirees, though, of course, are still in the legacy plan. We have 11,000 retirees and 10,475 are in the legacy plan, or 92%. And in terms of the demographics of our active membership, that's shown on slide 5. Legacy plan, average age 53 and a half. They have almost 20 years of service. ERFC 2001, much different demographics, age 41, and they've just become vested. They have 6 years of service. Even in the legacy plan, though, you can see that why this plan was done away with, because the average member is not going to meet that sweet spot. They're not going to be age 55 and have 25 years of service. And so as the retirement age began creeping up, that's when the school board recognized that this plan wasn't designed appropriately for the current workforce. And when we design our communication programs, we really have to take into account the different demographics between these 2 groups. Slide 6 shows our average retiree characteristics. The average age that a member retired in the last fiscal year is increasing over previous years. In 2004, it was 58. Now the average age is 62, so that's a 4-year increase. And the average retiree has 22 years of service, so they're exiting at 54% of pay. Shouldn't be surprising to you, because if you take into account the fact that they're also getting Social Security, and we heard from Aon, Social Security represents about 24% of pay. You add those 2 together, you get 78% of pay, which coincidentally is exactly what Aon said you should be able to retire if you're able to replace 78% of salary. So it's really not a coincidence that these members are waiting till age 62 to retire. That's when they can afford to retire, when they're eligible for Social Security. The average retiree in 2001 plan is only exiting at 25% of salary, but the retirees that we have now in ERFC 2001 are second career. They probably have retirement savings from other employment that they had earlier in their career. So they are older, average age of 64, and only have 11 years of service. The second agenda item then was current trends. As we show in this graph, the ERFC active members in 2001, the green line, are growing. All of the retirees are increasing, that's the gold line, and the ERFC legacy members are declining, the blue line. And then the bottom 2 lines are members who left the system and they're still entitled to a vested benefit, so they'll be paid a monthly benefit at retirement. And then slide 9 really covers a lot of what we talked about during this last fiscal year of how long it takes a new plan to become the dominant plan. So it wasn't until 2007 that the ERFC 2001 plan had more members in it than the legacy plan. So you can expect that in Tier 2 that you just enacted, that it'll probably be 2023 before you see the majority of the members in Tier 2. We're still seeing the membership growing. Teachers are continuing to be hired, so the total membership increased 1% in 2016 from 2015, so that's a good thing for a defined benefit plan to have your membership continue to grow. And the next slide looks at our retirements that we have in our fiscal year. They did drop significantly during the financial crisis. In FY 2009, we had retirements down 19%, and they stayed that lower level for a couple of years, but we've seen retirements now pick back up, and FY 2016 was really our highest year, 678 retired. In this fiscal year, we had 603 through May. We're looking at through June now. We have June numbers 613, so we have slightly fewer retirements this fiscal year than we had last year. And we've already processed 396 applications for July 1, so we're busy this month putting our new retirees on the payroll. It's about the same number that we had last July. Last July we had 399 teachers retire. And the next page shows the benefits paid and the economic impact that it has in Fairfax County. We did pay $164 million out in retirement benefits in 2016, and most of these dollars did remain in Virginia. 71% of our retirees live in Virginia. We also have 45% of them that remain in Fairfax County. That's one of the purposes of ERFC, was to be able to have our members be able to afford it, to retire in Fairfax County. It is a valuable economic benefit. To have 74 million of these payments remain in Fairfax County, and then add on the Virginia benefit, which is about 140 million. So that's the total dollars spent or available to be spent in Fairfax County. And we did do a study similar to what the school board did on FCPS, that ERFC, there's support of an additional 249 million in total impact, total economic impact in Fairfax County because of these pension payments. So almost $500 million of expenditures available because of the retirement payments in Fairfax County. So the third area that I said I was going to cover were our total fund returns, and we did show you these returns back when we were here on April 24th, the March returns. So we are showing these for the 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15-year periods ending in March. These time periods are the periods that are commonly quoted in the investment community on periods to measure investment returns. We're showing these net of fees. We certainly heard the school board during the past year prefer to see the returns presented in a net of fee manner. Our concern was the pure universe for net returns is not as robust. There's only 50 funds in this universe, but the industry standard is moving toward reporting fees net of returns, so we are having our consultant do that now. We have 3 goals. One, we want to meet our actuarial earnings rate assumption, which is 7.25, and we are conservative on that measure. We've looked at a couple of surveys, the R.V. Coons and the National Conference on Public Employee Retirement Systems surveys, and the median fund is at 7.5, so we are more conservative than the median fund. The second goal is we want to outperform a benchmark. So this would be if we were indexing everything, that's how that benchmark would perform. And we have a very diversified portfolio, so that benchmark is footnoted at the bottom. We have a lot of acronyms in the investment community, but we do have a fund that's comprised of large cap, small cap stocks, international developed markets, emerging market, fixed income, real estate, private equity. So all of the asset classes that you could think of, we have the $2 billion ERFC fund diversified into these different asset classes. And then our third goal is to perform as well as our peers, and we do use universe that's supplied by our investment consultant that has 50 funds in it. So if you look at how ERFC performed for the period ending March, the blue line, we were above our benchmarks for every period except the 3-year. We also met the 7.25 for the 1 year and the 7-year. And then for the 15-year, we did return 6.4%, certainly below our 7.25, but that was in the 23rd percentile, so all funds did not do well for that period of time. So these are really reviewing what you saw back in April. The new results that we have, these are hot off the press from Thursday, are on page 14. We do have investment returns for this fiscal year. We have them compared to our benchmark. We do not yet have the peer returns available. But you can see, we were saying all through the fiscal year that these returns are very endpoint sensitive, and it really is perfectly illustrated in the returns for June. That 1 quarter makes a difference. So for the fiscal year, we had an 11.8% net return, which is great just on an absolute basis. And we also exceeded our benchmark return, which would be the return if we index everything, which was only 10%. So we're very happy with the returns for the fiscal year. We were close to the 7.25 in all periods except the 3-year and the 10-year. And we exceeded the benchmark in all periods except that 3-year. And it really does illustrate that active management paid off during this time period rather than being 100% passive, that it was a period of time where active management was to our advantage. We did have VRS release its net returns last week, and coincidentally, they had 11.8% net return for the fiscal year as well, so we were pretty proud that we matched the VRS return. Page 15 shows the calendar year returns, and also these are net of fees. Show these for the last 8 years, and you can kind of see why the investment community goes 1, 3, 5, 7, because they're very volatile if you just look at a 1-year basis. But in 5 of the 8 years, we did exceed, or we were close to the actual earnings rate assumption of 7.25. So it's nice to have a calendar year. If we make it through the next 6 months as successfully as we did the first 6 months, we'll be in good shape for this calendar year. Slide 16, just to remind you of what our goals are and what the Board of Trustees is trying to do. Certainly have an overall goal to make progress in getting to be 100% funded and having a stable employer contribution rate. We do, to meet those goals, we smooth the asset values over a 5-year period so that you aren't subject to these yearly ups and downs. We set the contribution rate for a 2-year period, and we announce that way in advance to help you in your budgeting process. So that certainly helped this last budget cycle because we announced the 6.4% well in advance, and that allowed you to take measures to help mitigate that adverse budget impact. The next slide shows our funding ratios. As I said, we're trying to get to 100% funded. It has been very difficult since the financial crisis. Pre-financial crisis, we were in the 86%, 88% range. We've pretty much stayed in the 77, 76% range since that time. We are right now finalizing the 2016 valuation results, and it looks like we're going to stay in that ballpark. I did footnote here the average funded ratio of public employee retirement systems is 76%. That's was tabulated by a survey put out by the Public Employee Retirement Systems. And I also did want to remind you that the actuary that was here in April from Aon pointed out that comparing funded ratios against different retirement systems is not always apples and apples. So we do have to put forth a word of caution on comparing different retirement systems. We, as I said, have a conservative earnings rate assumption of 7.25. We've also updated our mortality table to make sure that we are conservative and people living longer in a defined benefit retirement system is not a good thing. So if the median retirement system has a higher earnings rate assumption, 7.25, and hasn't updated their mortality table, they may very well have a higher funded ratio than us, but are not in as good a shape. So just wanted to remind you of that. The next slide shows our contribution rate history. Our second goal is to make a stable employer contribution rate. It was very stable from the period FY13 to FY17, so this was the first fiscal year that we had seen a significant increase. And remember that it went from 4.34 to 5.34 from FY12 to FY13 because that's when you decided that you would reduce the ERFC employee contribution because the VRS employee contribution was going up at that period in time. And remind you that the contribution rate this year went up because of that decrease in the earnings rate assumption and the mortality table upgrade. And our third goal is to satisfy our accounting and actuarial standards. There were new GASB standards that were put in place, so what you see in our CAFR is the liabilities that are computed in that document differ from the manner in which we compute them for funding purposes. So unfortunately, you can't compare numbers from the annual financial report to numbers that are in the actual evaluation. So we have to make sure that when we have requests for why did the liabilities go up from the annual financial report to actuarial evaluation, reminding individuals that they cannot make that comparison. So the fourth item on the agenda was to look at our historical expenses, our investment expenses, and our administrative expenses. The green bar shows the investment expenses, the blue bar are administrative expenses. And the administrative expenses in the current fiscal year that just closed, FY17, are projected to be slightly higher, up 1.8%, primarily due to employee salary increases. And the administrative expenses that are included here are our membership service and support staff compensation, so our customer service, our actuarial, legal, other professional services, rent, and miscellaneous expense. So that's what we categorize as administrative expenses. We did put in a new benefit administration retiree payroll system in 2010. That's helped decrease our personnel costs. So our personnel complement now at 28 is lower than we had back in 2009, which was 31. We're also processing retiree payroll in-house. We saved $115,000 annually by doing that. We renegotiated our lease in 2012 to save $900,000 over the 10-year period. We put in place paperless initiatives to cut out postage and printing costs. So we're very cognizant of administrative expenses and try to keep those as low as possible. The green bar is total investment expense. This includes the money that we pay to our external investment managers, to our investment consultant, and any ERFC investment-related staff. These expenses are increasing, not always a bad thing. You want your assets to be going up, and as a result, investment expenses are going to increase as well. We do look at survey comparisons of our investment expenses and our administrative expenses. So on slide 21, you have our investment expenses that are compared to similar-sized funds. Internal expenses, and that's our investment-related staff, lower than the average fund in our size range of the $1 to $5 billion fund. So internal expenses at 5.76 basis points versus the average fund at 10, about 10.5. Our external management fees are a little bit higher, 60 basis points versus 51. But total, we're certainly in the ballpark of the average fund, 66 versus 62. Our investment expenses are a little bit higher because we have higher allocations to private equity, real estate, other alternatives, which tend to have higher investment fees. The administrative expenses are shown on the next page. The 2016, we used a firm by the name of CEM Benchmarking, which did this survey for us. And they concluded that our costs were $126 per active member. It's better to measure administrative costs on a per active member basis. That was significantly below our peer average, which was $321. The reasons cited for why our costs were so much lower than the funds in the universe here was because we used fewer staff to serve our members, our professional fees are lower, our administrative fees are lower, and we have fewer transactions. So one of the examples they cited was that we receive fewer calls into our call center. And they viewed that as a good thing. That meant that the tools that we have out there on our website, the information that we have on our website, allows us to have fewer calls come in, which allows us to have lower staffing in that area. We're also very proud of the fact that we ranked highest in the survey on service, and primarily, again, due to the online services that we have available to our members, our communication programs, the information that we have in our annual member statements, the timeliness of placing retirees on payroll. They cited that we place 89% of our retirees on payroll the first month. We actually put 100% of our retirees on payroll in the first month. The only difference is those that we don't have paperwork for, and the average fund only places 43% on payroll. So we certainly are ahead of our peers on that measure. Our call wait time, 33 seconds versus the average fund of 59 seconds. So we're very happy with the results of that survey. The next slide reviews our 2017 accomplishments. One of the major items that the Board of Trustees wanted us to accomplish in our strategic plan was development of an ambassador program. This is where volunteers in schools and other centers volunteer to act as an employee representative for ERFC as a resource in their workplace. So we've had 42 employees volunteer as ambassadors. Most of them are located in the schools. We trained 22 of them last year. We're training an additional 20 this summer. This program has been very successful. We've had very enthusiastic individuals come in for the training. We explain to them the resources that are available on our website. They can field questions, and any of the questions they can't answer, they know where to find the answers to be able to pass those on to our staff. We know that teachers tend to trust other teachers, and if you're talking to your coworker and retirement comes up, they tend to talk to their coworkers about retirement. We just want to make sure that the best information is getting out there. And so we think this program is really hoping to have it grow and have an individual in each of the schools. This was one of the things that the school board wanted us to do, was to make sure that we got out there and that teachers realize the value of the retirement benefits. We also conducted a member survey. You have a link here to those survey results. We had 2,700 members respond. 62% saying they strongly agreed that ERFC does provide them with a valuable benefit, and that was up from the last survey that we did in 2013. Some of the comments that we received included, I live in Loudoun County, and the ERFC benefit is one of the reasons I've remained in Fairfax. It is an awesome benefit, and I'm not sure how many people understand the extent that FCPS supports this benefit. A second comment was, ERFC is a valued benefit unique to FCPS. Despite a lower salary than surrounding areas, I have opted to continue employment with FCPS because of ERFC. So we did have very good comments that we received in this survey, and also comments that will lead to some changes in our educational programs. We have in the past offered our information sessions to those within 5 years of retirement. We're expanding that this year to allow more members to go to our educational sessions. We do have a seminar every year where members can come in, and any members can come and hear from us, from the Virginia Retirement System, from Human Resources, and from Social Security as well. A third achievement in the last fiscal year was the completion of our asset liability study to see if our asset allocation is appropriate. We do this study every 5 years. There were some minor changes that came out of the asset allocation study, and we're in the process of implementing those now. We did reduce our hedge fund percentage. Even though this asset class performed as we had hoped in reducing risk, the board felt that it couldn't afford the lower returns that were achieved in this asset class along with the higher fees. So they did cut that hedge fund percentage allocation. They're also considering additional allocations to private equity and real estate to meet the 7.25% return target. But they know that these investments come with higher fees, so they've certainly heard the questions that you asked during the last fiscal year, and they placed increased emphasis on evaluating all of the investment managers and the investment consultant relationships from a cost-benefits standpoint. We also worked in the last year to formalize our customer service standards to make sure that we are meeting our members' service needs at the lowest possible costs. And finally, we also were notified that the ERFC CAFR received an award for its 2016 edition from GFOA for excellence in financial reporting. So we were proud of that achievement this 20th year in a row that we've received that award. The last agenda item was to look at 2018 initiatives. Certainly, we're working on implementation of the new tier, which the school board approved on April 24th. The legal work has all been done. The school board approved the changes to the plan document on June 22nd, so thank you for that. We are finalizing the communication plan for the new tier. We're in process of implementing that, updating handbooks, brochures, information session materials, all of the material on our website. We are going to the Great Beginnings orientation in August. We will have representatives there from the Virginia Retirement System, ICMA, RC, and we will advise the new teachers of their retirement benefits at that time. And then the last item that the Board of Trustees had on its 2015 strategic plan was to do an independent actuarial review. This is done to ensure that our actuary is the way they're performing the actuarial evaluation is sound. So we have a second actuary come in and make sure that they agree with the conclusions of the actuarial evaluation. So that's the state of ERFC for this fiscal year. Certainly open it up to any questions.
Please, obviously with the returns, the stock market has done very well in the last months. And as we've adjusted our mortality tables, because people are living longer, the question is, what do you think is a prognosis for ever getting back to 100% funded?
I think it still is going to take a long period of time to do that, and whether that's your goal or not, maybe you want to get to 80%. That may be your goal in the shorter term to do that. When you look at those calendar year returns, remember I said we amortize those over a 5-year period. We still have some losses that we have to factor in.
I mean, there were some very tough years, no matter
So
what.
the fact that we're going to have a good calendar year in 2017, and we had a fairly good calendar year in 16, but we have a couple of years behind that weren't quite as good.
Right.
So, we're probably going to stay in that high 70s funded ratio for a while until we get those losses phased out of the system.
Until they're beyond. The other question: what is the funded situation for VRS? I know that we are back to the contribution rate that the General Assembly had set, and we've done that. But what is their funded ratio? Their
funded ratio is lower than this. I think the last one I saw is 71%, but they're doing an actuarial evaluation. They'll be doing an actuarial evaluation now for the period ending in June.
I guess that would be one of my next steps, is whether or not we could get just a brief report on the health factor of the VRS. I don't know that we ever get that. I don't know if we get that from you, get from staff, but just somebody ask the state for a brief description of their ability. Thanks. Thank you very much for the report. And it always looks good when the stock market does well. So.
It helps a lot.
It helps. And thank you very much for keeping your eye on fees and management costs, and because I know that we've asked a lot of questions about that. And so I appreciate the fact that you continue to keep your eye on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Megan, followed by Sandy.
So I appreciate the report and the information enclosed. On slide 21, where it's talking about the total investment expenses summary. So this is the one that I'm wondering if this is where we were getting some of the public inquiry, where if it says ERFC and then it shows the $1 to $5 billion, I guess, they're those type of funds that we would benchmark ourselves against. So I'm just trying to understand this one a little bit more. What
So the
takeaway is supposed to be from this?
The external investment manager expenses are driven by what asset classes you're in. So it's more expensive to invest in private equity and real estate than it is to invest in an indexed stock fund or an indexed bond fund. So you really have to get behind these numbers and say, well, if they pay lower fees, how are they invested? And are we getting our return out of those fees? It's not a bad thing if you're paying higher fees if you're doing better than your peers or doing better than index funds. So the reason that ours were higher than this peer group was that we have higher allocations to private equity and real estate and some of the other alternatives. So we are paying slightly higher investment fees. And that's why we have to keep an eye on those peer numbers, make sure that, and the index. The index this year showed that it was worth it to pay those higher investment fees because our performance was 11.8 versus 10% for the index fund. We would have paid a lot lower fees to be 100% indexed, but we would have gotten a lot lower return as well. We would have gotten a 10% return instead of the 11.8. So,
right. So on this particular chart, is there a reason that we're only just seeing what looks like it was the calendar year of 2016? The reason I ask is because I know some of these other charts you've given us where you're showing us the benchmarking at 1, 3, 5, 7. And so it's just sort of a way of being able to see
sure.
how things are going over time, like you said, because any one given year, what happens in the stock market and the returns to expenses can be very different.
So what we pay attention to is our peer returns net of fees. So that's what our investment consultant tabulates for us. So that's what you see in those 1, 3, 5. This survey is done by a different firm. They do it twice a year, so they do it in June and December, and they're only they do some comparisons of return levels, but they're the only survey that we have that does just the investment fees in this manner, so that's why we use this. But I would say you're right. You should really be paying more attention to index returns and peer returns net over those different time periods than paying attention to this chart. Because this chart doesn't give you how those systems are allocated differently and what their return they're getting for the fees they're paying.
The other thing is, in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned something about for employees that other than DC, no one's paying 8% employee contribution, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But part of the reason for that is because other jurisdictions, take Arlington, for example, don't have an ERFC. So they're just paying 5% into their VRS because that's all they have available to them.
Right. And I think what the comments that we were receiving during the fiscal year was you have a higher retirement benefit than all your peer systems. And we were trying to point out that, yes, we have a higher retirement benefit, but the employees are paying for a portion of that higher retirement benefit.
So thank you. And I think that's really important as we try to educate our employees. But I think what would help me as a board member then is to have benchmarking against other school districts where they have this supplemental retirement. In other words, it doesn't help me to be able to necessarily talk publicly about, oh, well, our employees are paying 8% and Arlington only pays 5%. Well, That's because there's a whole like an additional pension opportunity. So for other school divisions, they can save on the cost of employer contribution to a local retirement fund and give them more salary because they're not having to pay into that fund. So that in order for us to have, I think, a deeper dialogue with our own employees and people, how they assess and judge what Fairfax County school employees pay versus other employees in other school divisions, we need to, I think, be more clear and more articulate on that. And so when you said that earlier in the presentation, I'm concerned that I think this holistically, the ERFC board trustees, you as the managers, we as board members, we all need to be more comprehensive in our public remarks so that people really understand these very notable distinctions. Because maybe it might be easier and I think more meaningful. Dr. Braybrand, we had this conversation. What Fairfax County government employees pay into their local first, FCPS, yeah, is lower. And so we're technically, from a taxpayer standpoint, asking more of our employees to pay into their pension, as I understand it, than the county government is expecting county employees to be paying. And so that's, I'm very much driven toward, if you work for the county, whether in the schools or you work in the government side, we should be equitable. And the fact that people have said to us, well, if you're going to have the local pension system, your employees need to be paying for it because it's expensive. And I don't disagree with that, but where I struggle is how come the Board of Supervisors hasn't looked at having a more equitable employee-employer contribution from their employees. And so can you just clarify, Ms. Carr, if I captured that correctly, that our employees on the school side are paying higher percentage of their wages into their local pension?
And I would agree that with your comment that we have to be much more comprehensive in our remarks. And we tried to point that out during the last fiscal year, that FCPS employees are contributing more to their retirement systems, and their retirement benefits were reduced significantly in the Virginia retirement system with the hybrid plan. Those are really our two talking points that we had out there. And the Aon survey that we did show the retirement benefit provided by all the surrounding school jurisdictions and how much employees were paying, and compared it also to the Fairfax County retirement benefit. So the Fairfax County retirement benefit was shown to be more generous, and their employees were paying less. So those were definitely conclusions of that study. And I think you're right that message always needs to be communicated in a comprehensive manner to have both of those talking points.
Yeah, just because I think it really, we're going to have to work in really helping strengthen the education of our employees about what it means to be in a school system that has a local retirement that complements the VRS. Because most people just sort of think that if I teach in Arlington, I teach in Loudoun, I teach in Prince William, it's all going to be the same. And they don't understand that it's not. And yes, so far as I understand it as a board member, people still find in the end the ERFC is something they want to continue as part of a benefit for being an employee for Fairfax County Public Schools. But we really need people to understand that it comes still at a active cost while you're an employee, and the benefit then comes down the road. Thank you.
And that's why we're so happy about our ambassador program, because it's free. We can have these individuals out there speaking on our behalf. We want to keep our administrative costs low and not hire additional communication staff. But that's exactly what they're out there doing for us on our behalf, is spreading that word of how valuable the benefit is.
And I'll just echo that that's something that, as a board member, I've really developed an appreciation for my responsibility and working with our board and helping our superintendent there's things we can do that don't affect your costs at all, but just having charts, having data to really help people understand why it looks different, but where the benefit is to our employees. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Sandy followed by Elizabeth.
Thank you. I appreciate the report. Well done. I just actually have, I think, two quick questions. On slide 17, did I understand you to say that you expect the that ratio to stay in the upper 70s?
We expect that. We were just getting the preliminary results of the actuarial evaluation, but preliminary results show it to be in that 76% range.
So I'm wondering how one slide interacts with the other slide on 15. When you go to 15, and let's look at the nice return we got in calendar year 2009. 20, if I'm reading that right, 25.5% is what we got in that year. And so when I got to that point, I expected to see that ratio in 2009 to be much higher, and it did go up a tick, but it only went up to, at the time, from 86 to 88. I gather that's because the liabilities matched it. The liabilities.
We were only able to recognize 1/5 of that 25% return. The prior year you don't see on here was the financial crisis, where the fund was down about 25%. So this was the rebound from the financial crisis. So
I see. So you're not seeing 2008 when it tanked.
exactly.
Okay, and so it went back up, and I get it. Okay, well that puts that into context. And then with the better returns that we've been seeing, I still, and with some of the changes that we made this year, I'm a little surprised to hear that you don't expect it to the ratio to be going up.
Probably not for this actuarial evaluation because we haven't hired anybody in Tier 2 yet.
So
But
this
for
is
the
out in the
next-
distant. This is in the future.
Yeah, for the next
even with better
actuarial
returns.
evaluation, we'll have this good return number to factor in.
Right.
We will have hired more individuals in Tier 2, so
Okay. All right. So maybe in the future we'll see that going up. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So I want to go back to a point Ms. McLaughlin was making about the ability of us to communicate and the differentiation to employees between taking a job here and taking a job in Arlington. And Dr. Brabrand, I was hoping that Dr. Brabrand would help the clarity of a conversation we were having, I think, a couple times today around what needs to happen with the focus of what we're communicating to the employees. And Ms. McLaughlin hit on it with the fact that because we further enrich employees' retirement through ERFC, because of the employer contribution, we do not have the ability to contribute those same funds to salary. Doesn't it boil it down that simply? So operationally, I know the number, but I just want to have it said. Operationally, from operational dollars, not what's on the screen, how many operational dollars come out of our annual budget to fund ERFC?
that was the $75 million number I said for the last calendar year. For the FY 18, it's 90 million.
So 90 million. Okay, I was thinking about the larger number. I guess would be the overall. So what's the overall VRS? The overall VRS plus ERFC? 400 million? 480 million?
I believe that's close because VRS contribution rate is probably 3 times the ERFC.
The VRS is 16.32, and we're 6.24.
Okay, so I think it's 480 million I'm not off by a lot. And of that, $90 million, and remember our struggle earlier today, colleagues, over 1 million. 90 million is operationally dedicated out of our budget to funding a second retirement. And I think that has to be part of the narrative. It's part of the proactive, yes, colleagues, do you see that a neighboring jurisdiction will pay you $8,000 more? Okay, but it is the total compensation that has to be discussed, almost synonymously to any salary scale changes, to any market scale adjustments. It is the combination of, $90 million. And can we go to the other slide where it was the 76 up? Because this is the key, and this is what's painful. No, the one that shows in the out years.
Funded ratio?
No, the ratio where it's like 76%. Slide 17. There you go. So the question is that if you go out 3 or 4 or 5 years, that 90 million starts to turn into what?
Well, it will go up with what the compensation goes up.
Yeah,
So the absolute dollars are going to go up, even if the contribution rate would stay at 6.24%, which we hope it does, but if,
right,
total
if the contribution rate stays the same, which is we don't ask the employees to pick up any more of it, and we continue to bear the burden that we're bearing, you're having, it's going up.
going to go up just because total compensation goes
But a
up.
lot, right, in the out years?
I think I'm going to kind of try to address that from back here. It would go up only to the extent that your salary base is going up, if everything stayed constant. So if your contribution rate stayed at 6.24%, which it will be for FY 2018, it'll stay 6.24% of the salary base.
And that assumes a constant ratio, which potentially the ratio is not going to stay the same.
Not always, because that ratio is going to change if you have significant investment returns.
Which we don't have a history of. Our investment returns are actually less than our projected. We're in the 5%, not the 7% projected.
The investment, just this past fiscal year, the investment returns net of fees was 11.8%.
11.8.
For FY 2017 net of
That was
fees.
just the 1 year.
Correct, but
the
over
10-year
15 years is 7.1%,
Right. So
which included the downturn of 2008.
okay. So the fundamental answer is, Dr. Braybrown, in your discussion, and I know how you feel, like we either have to market it or we have to do something different. And in the marketing it, if we're saying our salary scales aren't in line with neighboring jurisdictions, that's missing the Paul Harvey rest of the story, which is we don't have, basically in the out years, $100 million to dump into salaries because we're investing in your retirement, in a second retirement that the neighboring jurisdictions don't have. So go ahead and go to a neighboring jurisdiction, because at the end, all of the signs that we've been seeing that people are so upset about is like, look, treat us, caring culture, because they know that their retirement is being affected. That same conversation works in reverse. They're two sides of the same coin, which is, and Ms. McLaughlin, I think this is what you were trying to get to, is like, look, we have 2 retirements. And so while we could keep chasing, we jump ahead, leapfrog, we'll move the salary scale, and then Loudon will move this out, and then Prince William will move it, and then we got to move it. Or we can start to have conversations holistically around total compensation.
May I?
Yes.
I want to leave it on time. The bottom line, there's a lot we can do here. The employer contributions doubled since 2009. And in 2012, we lowered the employee contribution by 25% from 4% to 3%. So you kept your 75%. That could have been a time for this board. The board did that now, not the board did that. You could have been up in the 80s, maybe even 90, you're in the 70s. There's a lot of ideas. It's day 6. You'll see a lot when we move forward around how, and look, and I'm candid, we had interviews about this when you interviewed me, and I'm not going to say anything different because I don't believe anything different. There's a tremendous opportunity. This is a tremendous asset, and we need to figure out how we tell that story far, far better. We're spending real resources around this program, and we need to make sure it's conveyed. And I'm excited about the ambassador program, and some of the ideas are how it's great to get it to the people in the last 5 years. We need to be even talking about people in the first 5 years where you didn't just get in here for a great salary lane. You have a total, it's almost the Wizard of Oz. You'll never want to leave again. I mean, this is color, everything else. All the school systems are black and white.
That is precisely your marketing campaign.
Okay, I was about to speak on that point, but I have 2 additional members, so I'll speak after them. I have Karen and then Tom.
Earlier today, we talked about 461 employees that are at step 19 that are not getting steps this year. When you look at those 461 employees on step 19, does that mean that they're in the ERFC legacy program? Can we assume that?
No, you can't. You couldn't assume that. I mean, there are individuals in ERFC 2001 that are at the top of the step as well.
Because they came in as a BA 15.
Right, and some on the unified scale that came in at advanced steps.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Tom?
Okay, thank you. This is a very helpful presentation. My question actually has to do with this slide. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the current unfunded liability, am I correct in calculating that as somewhere in the $650 million range?
That's correct. The unfunded.
Yeah. And in 2007, that number was something like 15, not too good, but maybe $150 million?
I don't have that number with me, but yeah, certainly the asset base was
like
lower.
15% of 2.3 billion. It looks like would be something like that. And in an earlier question, you talked about a short-term goal of maybe reaching 80%. There's right now close to a 24% unfunded liability, and I guess what I want to know is when is that short-term goal, would that be achieved, and how are you going to get there? I would like to know, that's a whopper of a number, $650 million of unfunded liability. It makes me very nervous just to hear it. And so what I'd like to know is, what's our game plan to get a higher funding ratio?
Our game plan, and some of this increase in the liability was because of the improvements that we made in the valuation. But we are continuing to look at, on the investment side, choices that will help us achieve a higher return net of fees to get to that 7.25. So the investment returns certainly help. The introduction of the new tier with the lower benefits is going to help that liability go down. But I view this more as a mortgage. And if you said you had 75% of your home value funded, and you were age 50, you had 15 years to retirement, and you'd say you were in pretty good shape. And that's sort of how you need to view a defined benefit plan. This has infinite life. We're 76% funded, about the average of systems across the country. certainly is not a crisis here. This would be considered to be adequately funded. We are amortizing that liability over a 23-year period, so it will eventually go down, just like your mortgage balance will go down. So I think that you have to have the right viewpoint in viewing this as a long-term obligation. That's how defined benefits are planned. We look in periods of 30 years. We don't look at, we need to get it to 100% in 2 or 3 years.
So other than the investment return, what other factors would affect that funding ratio? So for example, I'm thinking out loud. Let's say we had our population of employees go down, would that affect that ability to change that funding ratio if there were less contributing?
That actually hurts a defined benefit plan. So when I said earlier, the fact that our membership is going up, that helps. What helps is actually if employees leave and aren't vested and take their money, refunds help us. So some of it is counterintuitive.
So employees who leave that aren't vested and then
take their money out, they are not getting the value of that employer contribution, and so
employees in years
high termination levels, which you don't want to see, but that does help a defined benefit plan. Delaying retirement helps a defined benefit plan. So if individuals are not retiring when we expect them to retire, which happened during the financial crisis, that helps a defined benefit plan. So you have to look at each of the demographic characteristics and see whether it increases or decreases your liability.
Okay. Knowing that, how often do you review the investment categories that you're in to perhaps take more risk to get a better return to hedge against the possibility of, we obviously don't want it to go lower than 76%, but
we do a formal study every 5 years, but we have our investment consultant come in quarterly. So the Board of Trustees is continually looking at the asset allocations. They don't like to make moves frequently, but they are certainly, and I think one good example was interest rates, and the Board of Trustees recognizing that the only way interest rates could go was up, and that hurts. Bond prices go down when interest rates go up, and so they did look at different strategies during that time period. They put in place a strategy to protect them if interest rates did start increasing. That paid off very well this year. Our fixed income portfolio earned 6.4%. The index was negative. So they are looking at different strategies to try to mitigate those types of investment losses.
But do you think it's reasonable to expect the fund to get 80% funded in the 5-year time frame?
I think so. With the Tier 2 changes, the benefit reductions, coupled with improved investment returns, I think that's realistic. Probably wouldn't have made that statement sitting here a year ago. Okay. I mean, with those two things.
Yeah, and I know I understand that with an actuarial viewpoint, you're looking at 30 years. I'm happy to see that you're kind of sanguine with the idea that we're taking a long-term view, but I am anxious about that gap growing, and it's just a big dollar amount, and it just is worrisome to me that we need to chip away at it and have strategies that protect us.
No, I agree. It's a concern. It's a concern not only for a defined benefit, but it's a concern for individuals in 401ks that have a huge gap.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I want to thank you. I think my colleague spoke to it, and my main question and concern was, I think, back several years before I was on the board, we decided communication was really important, and the ERFC added either a half or a full-time position for that. And so my question request, I think, is a little bit similar to what I'm hearing from Dr. Berbrand and Ms. Schultz, is the collaboration with HR and with the rest of FCPS as we do outreach to the community, to new and prospective employees, to make sure that we have the best use and effective use of what ERFC is and does, as we're trying to recruit, because it is something that stands out that our neighboring jurisdictions don't have. So you can speak to that now, or just happy to
No, you're
discuss later.
correct. We doubled our communication staff with the addition of that one person who's doing a great job for us. Lisa's our other communication person. We do work very closely with HR. They participate in all of our information sessions, and we certainly can entertain more discussions with Dr. Ramey on other outreach efforts, but we're working with them on Great Beginnings. We go to the open house, the health insurance briefings in the fall. We're present, so we pair up with them in a lot of different events.
Yeah, and I guess we're speaking to before we get to Great Beginnings, right? So I know Mr. Guilfoyle recently changed his communication staff, so it might just be a good opportunity to figure out a way to
In terms of
to
recruitment?
integrate.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you so much. And it is now almost 5:45. I don't see Mr. McElveen. He's coming for our final work session, but thank you so much to you and your staff and your board for everything you do for our employees.
I thank you all for your tough questions during the past year. I think it made me a better executive director, better ERFC staff, and certainly Board of Trustees. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.